In this lesson, I'll show you how to light your scene using Octane Renderer. Let's get lighting. So I'm going to be using Otoy's Octane Render inside Cinema 4D. And this is an unbiased GPU render engine. Unbiased meaning that there are no shortcuts in the calculation of the render, and GPU meaning that you need adequate graphics cards in order to run the software. But you should be able to follow along using other render engines. Let's get started. I'm going to head to my Octane tab here and select Live Viewer window. Just going to pin this to the side here next to my design. Now I'm going to activate Octane, and that gives us a rendered image here, and we can just quickly scrub through and you can see rendering in real time, which is great. I'm going to change the kernel type from direct lighting to path tracing, and you can see why. If you look at the image just in here, change that, you can see that the image is a lot less muddy, and that's because the light's actually bouncing now because we're using path tracing. Now I'm going to change the render settings just so the image preview resolves a lot quicker. If I select the settings here, I'm going to change the max samples to 1024, the diffuse depth down to 10, and same with specular. And the GI clamp, I'm going to make 100 for now. So now the image is going to resolve a lot quicker. I'm also going to change the clay type, just pressing this button here, and that's going to allow us to see how the scene's being lit. At the moment there's no lighting in, so it's quite flat, but now we can start adding some lights. So I'm going to be lighting this scene using a HDRI, and what that stands for is High Dynamic Range Imaging. And it's a photograph which is captured to reproduce a greater range of luminosity. And it's used in 3D to provide detail and realism to 3D scenes. So let's find and add a HDRI to our scene. There are lots of ways of finding them on the web. There's free sites and there's paid collections. So this is a free site called HDRI Haven. You can actually pledge to their Patreon page and get some additional offers. But this site here actually allows you to use any of their maps for commercial and personal projects for free, which is really great. And they've got lots of different options. So you've got the image here, which you can see the effect it has on 3D spheres. So you can see the reflections or refractions and also the lighting and shadows. So that's really useful. And you've also got different size maps depending on the level of detail that you require for your scene. And there's literally hundreds of images which you can go through and see the effect of. You know, depending on your scene, you might need something that has kind of overcast qualities to it, or something sunny, reflecting the different kind of environments. So this is kind of a city scene, I guess. Another site, which is a paid site, is Grayscale Gorilla, and they provide lots of HDRI images in collections, different packs. And if you're a Plus member, you get all of the packs, as well as one of the plugins that they have, which allows you to switch between different images really quickly and just speeds up your workflow, so that's worth a look. But for today, I found this image. I like the contrast in the shadows here. I think this will work quite well for the scene that we're working on. So I'm going to download a 4K map just for now and head back to Cinema. So in order to bring the downloaded image into Octane, we need to head to our live viewer and go to the objects and select HDRI environment. And that's going to give us a sky object with an environment tag, an Octane environment tag. So if we select on the tag and then select on image texture, we can bring our image into here. So if we just navigate to where that downloaded and select open, it's going to say this image is not part of the search path. We're going to select yes, so that way it copies it into our texture folder inside our Cinema 4D folder. And already you can see the effect that that's had just by bringing that image map into the environment tag. So what I'm actually going to do is with the environment tag selected and inside the image texture, I'm going to go to type here and select float. And what that's actually going to do is take the color information out of the image we downloaded, because I don't want the colors from the image to affect the colors of the design. We've got an image HDRI into Octane. We can actually play around, and you can see live just by this is actually just rotating the image from left to right. You can rotate it on the y-axis as well. And if we click out of the camera, I can actually show you what's happening. So you can see the image in the background here in Octane. And you can see just by rotating the image, the effect it's actually having on the design. So that's really cool. So I'm just going to go back, turn my stage object on. Just find a nice place to adjust the X rotation to. Let's go to the end, have a look. I think I want my shadows kind of pointing downwards. And we can click on our clay mode here just to see how it's working with the color. There's also options here to brighten or reduce the kind of luminosity of the light. I'm just going to keep that on 1 for now though. So now that we've added a light, we can actually have a little bit more control how our design looks by playing with the camera settings. And in order to do that in Octane, we need to add some Octane camera tags. So if we select and press Control on all 3 cameras, I'm going to head up to Tags, C4D Octane tags, and then Octane camera tag. And that's going to add a tag on each of the cameras. And that gives us options for things like depth of field, motion blur, and also this camera imager, which I'm going to enable. So we've got options here now to play with the exposure. So if I take the exposure up, you can see that the whites are actually quite blown out. And if I pull the highlight compression up, that's just going to kind of clip the whites there so they don't blow out as much. Also got gamma. And what I'm actually going to do to give myself a little bit more range in the sort of the color information of the design, I'm going to select on response and head down to linear. And I'm going to set my gamma to 2.2 as default. So we're back to close to where we started with the response being an sRGB. Now I'm just going to tweak the settings to find something that I think is going to work. Remembering we haven't added any textures at the moment. Things will respond differently once we add a bit of detail to the actual materials. Just tweak things a bit. Here we can also check our clay mode and seeing how that looks. We can also zoom in by pressing the lock here. So this is actually full scale, so this is full resolution. You're actually seeing the image at, so we can kind of have a look around and see what the camera settings are doing. And then we can check through, so I've affected all of the camera tags at the moment, but let's have a look at how we're looking in some of the other shots, making sure that things aren't blowing out. You know, we can adjust these individually. So we can just scrub between these. Maybe it's blowing out a little bit here. There's a lot of highlight here, so let's reduce that. And we could always adjust this in post as well. It's really good practice to try and get as much as you can inside the 3ds software before rendering it out, but we do have options to adjust when we color correct in After Effects. Looks like I've got 2 different whites and I'm not really sure why. Let's have a look at the colors. I'm not sure what that's from. So I'm actually going to overwrite this color here by selecting this material, pressing Command. Last thing I'm going to do is going to animate the HDRI, just to give us a little bit more animation. I think it could be cool if the light was moving as if it could be the sun or something like that. I'll go into my white clay mode. We can have a look here. So maybe I can start at point 2. I'm just going to put a keyframe inside my environment tag, and on the rotation X, I'm going to press Control and put a keyframe in at frame 0. I'm going to make this 0 on the X rotation, and then at frame 175, I'm going to make it 0.2. So we could add additional lights to the scene to create highlights if we like. I like to keep things quite simple, but you can actually come in here and use, like, there's daylight and area lights, spotlights. We could pop one of these in and just see if we can pick up some highlights on some of the edges. Just going to come in a bit closer so we can actually see what's happening. I might turn the cloner off. If I turn my HDRI to 0, I can actually see what this light's doing. It has a very different effect, but we could put a couple of lights in the scene if we wanted. And you can just adjust the lighting parameters by selecting on the octane light. And, we could do a 3-point lighting setup. Different options here. I'll just quickly show you. So if we come to lights and select daylight, you've got options here for different times of day and the parameters of the sun. We could take the saturation out of the sun color. If I actually delete that tag, and I can just rotate it, you can actually see in this view what's actually happening. So if we point this down, you can just rotate this around. I'll pull the power down a bit. It's another way you could actually light your scene just using sunlight. But I'm going to stick with my HDRI.
Now that we've lit the scene, in the next lesson I'm going to show you how to add textures to your design. I'll see you there.